Hey guys, it's Miss Burton. Today let's take a look at the basics of the Google Drawings app. I'm going to go up to my Google Apps, which some people call the waffle. It's next to my icon in the upper right-hand corner of my screen. I'm going to go to Drive. Once I'm in Drive, I'm going to go to the plus sign in the upper left that says New. And I am going to go all the way down to the bottom where it says More. I'm going to slide over to Google Drawings. As it opens up, I have a rectangle that has a faint checkerboard in the background. You can think of this as your paper if you're doing a drawing. The space around it you can think of as your desktop. So anything that doesn't fit inside this rectangle, if you download and share your drawing, it's going to get cut off. So you want to make sure that everything that you're doing that you want to keep as part of your drawing ends up in this space here. It's always important to title your document. So I'm just going to call this Explore Google Drawings so that I can find this again and I know what it is. All right, let's take a look at your toolbar. And right now it's pretty small. You've got Undo, Control Z. You've got Redo, Control Y. It's good to use those shortcuts. You have the printer icon. I'm not going to print anything. You have a Zoom tool. Zoom to fit is very useful so that you can see the entire thing, or you can do your basic zooming. Your selector tool. You have a line menu. So notice you have just a basic line, but you also have a drop-down menu. You have an arrow, you have an elbow connector, curve, a polyline, and a scribble. For today, I'm going to show you the line, the arrow, but mostly the curve and a little bit of the polyline and the scribble. Next to that, you have the shapes menu. Shapes gives you 4 sections: basic shapes, arrows, callouts, and equation symbols. Then you have a text box. You have an insert. You can insert images. You can upload from your computer. You can search the web right here. You can take things from Drive, from Google Photos. You can put things in by the URL, or you can use a camera. Okay, and then you have a chance to add comments. So up above, you have File, Edit, View, Insert, Format, Arrange, Tools, and Help. And all changes are saved in Drive. Okay, so let's start out by looking at your line menu. You've got a basic line. If I just click once, it gives me a simple line with 2 ends. Okay, a straight line connects those 2 points. After that, I can do an arrow. So again, if I just click once, I get a line that's plain on one end and has an arrow on the other end. Going down below that, I get what's called an elbow connector, and it does this kind of a thing. Okay, I don't personally find that super useful for doing just a basic drawing, but you might. There's similar to that, there's a curve connector, so same deal. Okay, so it's just, these are just lines that don't have any fill in, they're not a closed figure. So as I continue on down, I get to the curve, and you look at that picture of a curve, and it's a curved line with points on either end. So I can do that. I can click once, and as I pull away, I just get a straight line. But if I click again, then I pull away from that, my line starts to bend or curve around the point where I clicked. If I click again, I can curve around that point. I can keep going and bending. Okay, and if I get back to where I started, you'll notice that if you get close to that beginning point, it wants to grab it. So if I let it grab it and then I click and I let go, notice that it fills in the shape. So I'm just going to leave that for now. Let's continue down the menu, and I'm going to go to Polyline. Now, Polyline is going to behave very similarly to your Curve tool. I'm going to start off with a point where I clicked it. I'm just going to pull over and click a second time, but notice this time it doesn't curve. It forms an angle from the lines that connect at that point, but they're attached. So I can go around and click. Now, if I accidentally click too many times and I let go, it's going to, it may default and fill in those spaces, or it might not. So it might leave that transparent. But notice that with the Curve tool and the Polyline tool, you do have the option, once you have that selected, you can see a light blue outline on it. You have the option to go in and add a color of a fill. Now, since I did not connect my beginning and ending points, it usually doesn't automatically fill in, but sometimes it does. And this is kind of a cool thing that can happen. But if I zoom in and I look to where I just put those points next to each other, notice they don't actually grab each other. So if I get super close, even if I put them right next to each other, they're never going to glue together like they did with my curve tool there. So in between the last 2 points that weren't connected, notice that you won't get an outline. Okay, let me go back to zoom to fit. And there's also a scribble tool on here. So notice with the scribble tool, I can make kind of just a random scribbly line. And when I let go, it's going to kind of smooth it out a little bit. So notice that's a little bit smoother. All right, so this is all from the line menu. Now, something that I can do, I can click on an object and I can grab any of these points. I can stretch it. I can go from the corner and move around in a bunch of interesting different ways. Notice there's this little dot at the top where I can rotate. If I want to keep my shape exactly the same shape, but just change the size, we call that scaling or resizing. I'm going to hold down the shift key with one finger, and then I'm going to use my mouse and click and drag from any corner. So any corner and the shift key, and I can scale or resize my object. Notice that I have a number of degrees as I'm rotating this, so 0 brings it back to where I started. Okay, and a really cool thing about working in digital art is anytime you do something and you say, oops, that was a mistake, I didn't mean to do that, you can go up to your undo, and you can undo all the way back to the beginning. So notice that there's a keyboard shortcut. If you don't know your keyboard shortcuts, they're a really good thing to use. So I'm going to use the keyboard shortcuts, and I'm just clicking, I'm holding down the control button, and I'm doing Control Z. Now, if I say, oh no, I lost all my work, I can redo. So I can click that a bunch of times, or I can just do Control Y with my keyboard, and it'll move me back towards everything that I've done. So Control Z, Control Y will move you around. All right, let me get back so that I have all the objects that I started with. And I think my arrow line is behind that. All right, so I'm just going to shrink this down, and I want to show you some things that you can do with these objects that you made. So Google Drawings is what's called a vector drawing program. It has a lot of similarities to Adobe Illustrator, which is also a vector drawing program, except this one is free. Okay, so I have this line here, and it's just a plain line. When I select it, I have these 2 dots, which means I can move them around. So I can change the length, I can change the angle, but basically a line is just a set of points that connects 2 ending points. I can change the line color. I can change what we call the line weight. It's the thickness, and the px stands for pixel. So 1 pixel is the default. I can double that with 2 pixels. I can go all the way up to 24, which is really thick. And whoops, anywhere in between. So that's what I can do with a line. I can do all of those things with any of these other objects. So notice that all of these have a line around them. Now, one thing that I can do is I can go to my border color, that line, and I can make it transparent. So I can make that outline disappear. I can change the fill color. So I have this set of default colors, my default color palette, but I can also click custom. And so I have lots more options there. I can drag this around. Gets lighter, gets darker. Okay, notice any color that's halfway light and dark is going to be a version of gray. It's just the grayscale. Okay, so I can move around in there. I can also adjust the transparency. So we say something is opaque if you cannot see through it. We say it's transparent if you can. So in the transparency slider, I can move that around. And if you don't have anything behind it, it's just going to look lighter. But notice you can kind of see that grid pattern through it. But if I move this, now right now it's behind things. If I move it forward, which is in my arrange menu, under order, I can bring it to the front. And now you can see that I can see through that. So I made that transparent. So if I don't like that, I can undo, but maybe I like where I moved it. So I'm just going to click on this color that's now in my custom palette. I'm going to click on the word custom, and I'm going to move that transparency slider back all the way to the right so it's opaque. So now it's in front and I can't see through it. So say that I actually want this behind this polyline object. I can go to the arrange order menu and notice it's all the way in the front, so I can't bring it to the front or bring it forward. Those are grayed out. I can send it backward, or I can send it all the way to the back. So if I send it backward, notice that's control down arrow. So I'm just going to do that, control down arrow. And it went behind this object, but did it go behind this one? It did not. So it's not all the way in the back. Whatever I drew first is going to be on the bottom unless I tell that object to move forward. So I can go arrange order. I can bring this all the way to the front. So now if I slide this over, it's going to be in front of this object. So you can think of this as stacking your objects in different layers. Okay, now my object that I drew with the scribble tool, if I double click it, nothing happens. If I double click on my object that I made with the curve tool, everywhere that I clicked my mouse, I get a little purple dot, and I can click and drag those and edit the shape. I can change where the curves go. So all of these points are just places where your line can curve around that point. So the more that you click to create an object with your curve tool, the more that you can edit it. You can always pinch it, stretch it. You can resize it by holding Shift and grabbing a corner. You can rotate it. As I showed you, you can change the fill. You can change the line thickness. Now, right now my line is transparent. I could make it a contrasting color, a different color. I can make it thick, so I have that thick outline if I like that. So these are all things that I can do. Now, you also have a shapes menu, and you've got lots of default shapes in here that you can use. You can do a little happy face. Okay, and the default is this light blue. You can change the color on your happy face. Now you can stretch it out. Notice that there's a little yellow diamond right here, which means that you can change that to a sad face. So you can move that curve around. You can rotate it. Now, if you've done my stick figure tutorial, you know that you can do better than this for a head. You could do a bean shape, and I could take this object here and I could make it into a bean shape, although that's a little bit of a pain. I showed in another video how to make that a little simpler, but you can move these shapes around. Okay, so with the scribble tool, all I can do is I can resize it, I can pinch it, I can stretch it, I can change the line thickness, and I can change the line color. Okay, but if I double click it, I don't get these dots that I can edit. With my polyline tool, I do. So similar to what I have with the curve tool, the only difference between the curve and the polyline tool is straight lines versus curves. Okay, and you could choose to have it transparent and just be the outline. Okay, if you want. And I'm going to undo because I don't like that change. Okay, something that happens with anything from the shapes menu, if you double click it, notice I get this blinking line, and we call that a cursor. That lets you know that you can insert text. Hello. Okay, and notice that once I'm working in text, I get a different set of tools in my toolbar. I have an align menu. I can put that in the center. Now, if I select that text with my selector tool, I can change the font. Okay, I can do basic things like bold, italic, change the font size, etc. It's kind of a strange thing to have on your face, but maybe you have a facial tattoo. I'm not here to judge. All right. One other really cool tool that we haven't looked at. I'm just going to move these things. I'm going to use my little arrows under my keyboard to get these things off of my paper. So one cool tool that we haven't looked at is under the insert menu, and it's called Word Art. So in Word Art, I get this box that wants me to type in some text. So I'm going to type in the word Tuesday, the day that it is. And notice that it comes up as Arial font. It has that 1 pixel thick outline that's black. It has the light blue color fill. Now I can change my font. I can fill this in. So this is something that you cannot do in a text box. So up here where this behaved as a text box, I also have a text box. So I'm going to write the word Tuesday and notice the differences in what I can do here. So here, if I double click it, I can change the size. I have limits about what size it can be. Okay, but I don't have any way to fill it in. I can't get an outline. I can certainly use the same font that I just used. So same font. I can change the color, but I don't, and I can rotate it. So it still behaves as an object or a vector, but I can't do some of the things that I can do with word art. So with word art, I can just resize it. I can squish it. I can stretch it, make it just look like artwork instead of lettering. After a while, it becomes impossible to read if you make too many changes to your text. But I can do cool things with the fill color. So one thing we haven't tried is a gradient. And there's a set of default gradients, and notice you can also go to custom. So say I do this one, and notice it's a little bit darker green on the edges. Now I could go in and I could make the border this blue-green. Okay, that looks kind of cool. I can make the border a little thicker, 2 pixels instead. But I can go into that gradient and I can customize it. So notice that it's centered. So it's lighter in the center. And right now they've selected this color right here. So I can change that color. I can make it yellow if I want. I could change this color over here. I'm going to make that purple. Okay, so notice that in the center, it's going to be that warm yellow fading to orange. So I can change where that goes. So notice that this completely changes what's going on there. So these are options that I don't have with a text box. Okay, and I can simply resize. Something that you can do if you want to make a copy of any of your objects in Google Drawings is you can select it. And many of you already know that under the edit menu, you can copy and paste. And many of you probably know Control-C and Control-V are basic commands. Duplicate is something that's available in Google. And if I go to duplicate, it does copy and paste all at once. So I just have to have something selected, Control-D, and it makes an exact copy. And I can do that any number of times that I want to do. Now I can take my exact copy and I can certainly do some edits and make some changes. I could change that text. Okay, and that didn't fit because my font was so big. I can change the font. Okay, etc. I can rotate. I can make this transparent so I could see that one through it. Okay, one last thing that I haven't shown you is grouping. So say I want these to stay together. Say I'm going to make the drama mask. There's a name for that, that comedy and tragedy masks. And if I want to click on one and move it, I want the other one to move. I'm going to undo it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my selector tool, draw a box around both of them. And notice there's a little blue outline around both of them. They're both selected right now. Under the Arrange menu, I have a grouping option. You can think of that as glue. So once I've grouped objects, if I click on one, notice it selects both of them. So in that case, I can move them together. I can rotate them together. I can copy and paste. I can duplicate them together. Okay, and these are all things that they can do. And last but not least, I can change my background color. Okay, so do notice that I have some parts that are hanging off at this point of my drawing. And if I wanted to share this, put it into another document or just download and print it or share it on social media, for example, if I want to go to File and Download, your basic images, the most common one is a JPEG. And it'll take a moment and then it's going to open down here. Now, if I double click and open this up, you're going to see that things that were off the edge of that workspace that had the checkerboard originally, they're going to be cut off. So notice that the edge of the word Tuesday and the edge of these objects is missing. So you want to be careful about that. Now, obviously, I can just move that over. Make sure it's within my border. Okay, and so I like having this thing hanging, oops. Like having this object here hanging off the edge. So I'm going to leave it like that. So if I go to File and Download, again, this gives me another copy. Notice that this time, everything that I wanted was in there. Now, I don't get a super clean download with a JPEG for some reason. If you want a cleaner download, you can do a PNG. And it comes out cleaner. All right, so that's what I'm going to show you today. I hope this was useful, and Feel free to explore Google Drawings. It doesn't cost anything. There's so much that you can do with this. You can make a cartoon, you can draw a landscape, you can draw portraits. There's options are limitless. So enjoy Google Drawings, and I'd love to see what you make. Have a great day.